I did not expect to be doing part 2 in the same day. As a holiday tradition, every year I rewatch the NBC series Smash. We were tricked, hoodwinked, and bamboozled, and I'm here to show you how. And this is part 2. Start the episode with Karen Cartwright in this sort of like karaoke looking situation. On site, it kind of looks like she's singing karaoke in front of all of the producers and directors of the show, but she's not. This is actually a dream sequence. A lot of times on the show, they'll have the characters sing a pop song. It's like Glee, but like different. This is all we had. You know, like us theater people, this is all we had. This is our representation to the rest of the world, to the non-theater people, right? Glee and Smash. No wonder they think we're ridiculous. But we're after the callback and nobody's been called. Not Ivy and not Karen Cartwright, but the episode is called The Callback. We're now in the room with Tom, Julia, and Eileen, and they are all arguing about which one should be cast as Marilyn. Tom is obviously gunning for Ivy Lynn, which I don't love. No, hear me out, because I do think that this is part of the way that NBC tricked us, because she has so many people in her corner. She's like so many people's favorite. It's like nepotism in a way, right? The fact that she's like the better actor for the part is just going to get overlooked because she does have the writer of the show like gunning for her. And there's going to be more. You'll see. But anyway, yeah, this is becoming a very heated argument. And Derek Wills is in the room too. And he's like, hey, okay, you know what? You're right. Let's call back Karen Cartwright and see if she can dance. So then these are the other ensemble members. I know that her name is Jessica, but I cannot remember his name because he does not follow us for the rest of the series. He was vaguely introduced in the last episode as a dancer that Tom slept with, but doesn't remember his name. Tom is so on his high horse in this whole series, but he's really just a slut like the rest of them. This is Ivy Lynn finding out who she's up against for the show. We also find out that Dev like works for the mayor. He's like some really big PR guy and he works in politics. A really unnatural moment here, which makes me feel like they got notes from the pilot episode and they were just trying to fulfill them. But we find out that there's going to be a very long wait for Julia and her husband to get the baby. And he's very unhappy with that. He's like, oh my God, this is going to take so long. Anyway, they bring Karen in and they teach her the choreography. He's struggling because the choreography is really, really fast. And Derek is, of course, being a slime ball. Here's Ivy Lynn's little friend being a creep. And he runs back to tell her about his experience with Karen Cartwright. And he like spills the tea about how it took her a really long time to learn the combination. This again is what I'm talking about. This is another person that's in her corner that acts shady. This is how they're setting her up to look like a villain because they have like this just shady little dancer also like running over and getting the tea, which I'm sorry is exactly what would happen. Whatever. Now we're with Julia and Tom, and they're just trying to figure out how they want the structure of the show to go. And they decide that they want Let Me Be Your Star to be the opening number, which is, I can't even talk about how ridiculous that is. Not the idea of having Let Me Be the Star be the opening number, but this whole setup. They have Marilyn in the center, and she's just got like all of these other actresses around her in these shadow boxes, and they're like, you're nothing, you're no one, your mother is crazy. She starts Let Me Be Your Star like all dejected. It's very strange, okay? It doesn't fit in with the vibe of any of the rest of the show. This is another forced moment where Ellis is kind of set up as a villain. He sort of vaguely mentions that it's exciting seeing his idea come to life. It was his idea. The book was on the table because he was reading it, and then Julia and Tom were, it was his idea. They're already fighting him for IP. Oh, I know that it seems like something that's said in passing is an idea, but we're doing all the work. Ignore my messy living room, but this is another one of Julia being a real bitch. Now we're back at Karen Cartwright's callback, and we're with Derek, and he's like very irritated with her. He goes outside to like go tell Ivy that it's going to be a couple minutes, and then they sort of flirt. You can tell they're kind of flirting. There's this vague notion that something is going to happen there, and that's another thing that I'm saying. They're making her look like a villain. What about Tom? And the dancer? Listen, he brings Ivy inside to meet Karen Cartwright. Then they have a conversation that's exactly like the one from Mean Girl. I didn't even record it because it was such a desperate ripoff, but she's like, oh, I love your scarf. And she's like, thanks, my mom gave it to me for my birthday. And she's like, oh, isn't that cute? It's like that early 2000s stuff. Like I can almost hear all of the men in the writer's room right now going, retract those claws. Eileen goes to this lunch that looks like it's a dinner. She's in this very dim steakhouse and everybody is drinking heavily. We're going to find out later that it's in the middle of the day. But she runs into her ex-husband and he's on a date with this woman here. She's just so honored to meet Eileen, and I just love this because it totally reminds me of another movie that they ripped off, The First Wives Club. This is exactly like that scene. Stop it. Okay, I didn't get a good picture of it, but like I said, I really feel like NBC got a note that they didn't like that Julia's character didn't seem to be interested in the adoption, but I could be totally wrong. But in this episode, we find out that Julia's husband, whose name I can't remember right now, it's not Leo, because Leo's her son. Anyway, he's upset because the adoption thing is going to take a long time, and he's kind of older now, and he doesn't want to be 70 years old when the kid goes to college. In this scene, he's telling her that he wants to go back to work because she's got her work, and all he has is the waiting game to find out if they're going to get the kid. The entire adoption plotline is completely shoehorned into the entire series. Like, it really has no bearing on the show. So anyway, Dev is at this meeting, this dinner meeting. It's supposed to be something important for him and his colleague at work. Karen had promised that she'd be done with her little rehearsal for her callback, which, what? in time to go meet him at dinner. Only in this scene, it becomes very clear that Dev is setting her up for some sort of like sexist misogyny fest because the woman at the table says that the person that they're meeting has an eye for the ladies, and the reason why he wanted Dev to invite his girlfriend is because she's hot. He knowingly set her up to be ogled by his boss. The audition runs long and she's like super late and he throws a fit at the restaurant. It's downright embarrassing. So now we see that he's not that supportive of her career. Then we cut to Derek and Ivy Lynn doing their rehearsal for her callback. She's reading a scene and he gets her to pull her hair down because he says now she looks like Marilyn. We go from this to this. That was really brief. I don't want to get flagged. I need to say how inappropriate that relationship is. He is the director. He has already hit on Karen, who's also gross, you know, because he's a gross person. They want us to see Ivy Lynn as like this bad person for going ahead and sleeping with him. They're going to throw it back in her face later in the series. Karen's all like, you know, I could have slept with him too, which is really fucked up. But like, listen, she's not the villain. Derek is the villain. He's so gross. Okay. This moment is more of them villainizing Ivy Lynn. Because while she's over here with like all of the dancers and the writer of the show, Karen Cartwright is like all by herself. Well, not completely by herself because Julia like sees that she's struggling and like goes over and sits with her and talks to her for a minute. This is a beautiful shot. I love how they are both wearing green. So they both have their callback. Karen hasn't heard anything. Ivy hasn't heard anything. They're walking out of the stage door and then Tom comes up to tell Ivy that he wants to tell her in person. She has a mini meltdown. She's like, okay, I didn't get it, but you need to leave me alone. I need to have my space. Then you find out that she got it. She got the part. Series over, right? Karen is like sobbing in her boyfriend's arms. It's very heartbreaking. We also have this moment here where Megan Hilty is singing another pop song. It's Carrie Underwood's Crazy Dream. It's so hard not to love her in this moment because you see that it was important to her too. It was very important. And this episode is kind of a nothing burger, to be honest. Julia wasn't as insufferable in this episode, but don't worry, the next episode she will be. But Derek goddamn Wills. That's his name, Derek goddamn Wills. So horrendous that I cannot believe that they did not ever do a moment where there was just fire shooting up behind him. He is the devil. Okay, I'll see you in part 3.